Good Wednesday evening to everyone. This is Miss Hampson for Screencastify number 4. I want to focus on the reading from that was due today for chapters 22 and 23 of Huckleberry Finn. And I'm skimming over the online discussions that you guys had. And so far, I'm noticing you're picking up on a lot of the really important things in these chapters. Just in the off chance you missed anything, I just wanted to highlight some things from 22 and 23. So in chapter 22, looking back at the Gutenberg.org, we see the artist's rendering of Colonel Sherburne standing on top of his roof. After having killed Boggs in the previous chapter, this angry mob shows up in front of his house and they're ready to lynch him. They're ready to kill him. And any normal person would be completely terrified of a bunch of people surrounding their house with weapons, getting ready to hurt you. Sherburne's very cool. He's a little too cool, calm, and collected. And what he says is so important. So scrolling down a little bit, he turns to the crowd and he says, right here, the idea of you lynching anybody, it's amusing. The idea of you thinking you had pluck enough to lynch a man, that you were tough enough to hang someone, because you're brave enough to tar and feather poor, friendless, cast out women that come along here. Did that make you think you had grit enough to lay your hands on a man? Why, a man safe in the hands of 10,000 of your kind, as long as it's daytime and you're not behind him. So he's really lacing into him here. And he continues here. This is also such a key paragraph. Sherburne continues on his rooftop with his shotgun, yelling at this angry mob, and he says, "Do I know you? I know you clear through. I was born and raised in the South, and I've lived in the North, so I know the average all around. The average man's a coward. In the North, he lets anybody walk over him that wants to and goes home and prays for a humble spirit to bear it. In the South, one man all by himself has stopped a stage full of men in the daytime and robbed the lot, excuse me. Your newspapers call you a brave people so much that you think you are braver than any other people, whereas you're just as brave and no braver. Why don't your juries hang murderers? Because they're afraid the man's friends will shoot them in the back in the dark, and it's just what they would do. Side note, this goes back to the Grangerford-Shepardson feud. Now, Sherburne does not know the Grangerfords and Shepardsons, but there was a similar issue in the Grangerford-Shepardson feud where someone was unhappy with a court ruling and then they just shot the people that they were upset at. And it sounds like this was a problem throughout the South in Twain's time. Sherburne references that vigilante justice here as well. And, this is the big money paragraph right here. Then Sherburne continues, so they always acquit. They always find the man not guilty. And then a man goes in the night, and he's very sarcastic as he says this, with 100 masked cowards at his back and lynches the rascal. Your mistake is that you didn't bring a man with you. That's one mistake. The other is that you didn't come in the dark and fetch your masks. You brought part of man, Buck Harkness there, and if you hadn't had him to start you, you'd have taken it out in throwing punches. He is referencing the KKK here. He is referencing the white supremacy groups that were forming, in particular after the Civil War, attacking African Americans, anyone sympathizing with African Americans. This reference to 100 masked cowards, that's supposed to be a reference to the KKK. This is also Twain calling out these white supremacists that were alive at his time and terrorizing people. So this is quite a speech that Sherburne is making. And then he continues in this paragraph. This is another super important paragraph. Sherburne says, you didn't want to come. The average man don't like trouble and danger. You don't like trouble and danger. But if only half a man, like Buck Harkness here, shouts, lynch him, you're afraid to back down, afraid you'll be found out to be what you are. Cowards. Woo, right there. That's key. Cowards. And so you raise a hell and hang yourselves on to that half a man's coattail, come raging up here, swearing with big things you're going to do. This is important here too. The pitifulest thing out is a mob. That's what an army is, a mob. They don't fight with courage that's born in them, but with courage that's borrowed from their masses and from their officers. But a mob without any man at the head of it is beneath pitifulness. Now the thing for you to do is to droop your tails, go home, and crawl in a hole. Woo! Twain's angry. If any real lynchings going to be done? It will be done in the dark Southern fashion. This is laced with sarcasm. When they come, they'll bring their masks. Again, a reference to the KKK and other white supremacy groups. So this whole thing, this is Twain calling out the white supremacy at this time. Sherburne only appears in these chapters, but this speech is really epic. It's such an important part of the book. Twain hits on so many things, including mob mentality, where there seems to be something within the American psyche that we seem to like to collect in a group and sort of stand behind someone who's raising the racket. But if we're pulled out of that mob, very few of us would actually stand up for that thing that we feel so charged up about. And of course, there are exceptions. Sherburne's an exception. Huck Finn's an exception. Emerson, Thoreau, many exceptions. But this idea of the raging mob senselessly following someone and ready to engage in violence, that's a big deal here. So hopefully that stood out to you as you were reading. Okay, something else that's super important as you were reading. Let's see. After this ridiculous show, the Royal Nonsuch, where the Duke and the King realized that the Southerners are not smart enough to appreciate Shakespeare after they were laughed off the stage for atrocious Romeo and Juliet recitations and other abominations that they did to Shakespeare, they decide, okay, we'll just have to give them low comedy. Let's give these low Southerners what they want. So they have the king. The king's going to come out and waltz around naked with paint stripes on him, all sorts of ridiculousness. But of course, they escape before there's any retribution. The people were planning on throwing food at them and just making them pay for what they've done. And of course, they had pulled this off a couple times. The third night was the night that the crowd was going to come after them. The thing that I wanted to point out was when they got back to the raft, Huck and Jim have a very important conversation after the Duke and the King fall asleep in their wigwam. Poor Huck and Jim have not been able to use their wigwam since the Duke and the King have basically raft jacked them, taken their raft. And the really important conversation towards the end of chapter 23, Huck wakes up and notices that Jim is crying. He's remembering in this paragraph here, he's remembering a very upsetting thing that happened involving his little daughter, Lisbeth. And Jim goes on to explain, please pardon the way I read this, I'm not a professional actress, as you know. Jim says, "What makes me feel so bad this time is because I hear something over yonder on the bank like a whack or a slam a while ago. And in my mind, the time, oh gosh, and it mind me, or the time I treat my little Elizabeth so ornery, so badly. She weren't only but 4 year old, and she was sick with a scarlet fever and had a powerful rough spell. But she got well, and one day she was standing around, and I says to her, I says, shut the door. So right here, he's saying, shut the door. He wants his daughter to listen to him, follow directions, shut the door. She didn't do it. Jim gets very upset and he's like, I lay, I'll make you mine, meaning like, all right, you're punished for not listening to me, for not shutting the door. And in this memory, in this final paragraph here, he says that he punishes his daughter, so hits her, and then realizes a few minutes later she's lost her hearing. Right here, he says, but I was mad. I was a going for the child, and just then it was the door that opened inwards. Just then, long came the wind and slam it to. Behind the child, kerblam, and my land, the child never moved. In here, he realizes she never budged, she never moved. She lost her hearing as a result of the scarlet fever, and this sadly was a common occurrence. If a child had scarlet fever and it wasn't treated, or couldn't have been treated, you would lose your hearing. So he has incredible guilt over doing something very innocent. He was just thought he was being a good parent, reprimanding his daughter for not listening when he said shut the door, but it turns out she couldn't hear him, and now he feels incredible guilt over that. This this reaction is so important, that Huck watches all of this. The fact that this helps to humanize Jim. He starts to realize Jim has the same emotions that a white person would have. He cares for his children. So it's super, super important that Huck witnesses this. And this is going to come back later on in the story. So anyway, I am positive I made this too long again. I'm sorry. I am so wordy. I talk too much. I hope this helps you though. And hope you guys are having a great Wednesday night. And I will talk to you guys soon. Oh, and don't forget to check out the announcement that I posted on Classroom regarding our new schedule starting this coming Monday, March 30th. And this is Miss Hampson. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Bye.